that it gets better. So as you were creating this mission, this voice, this message to these high school kids, you had to be really sure of the fact that you had to, or you didn't have to, but the right thing to do is to share the message of it's not necessarily going to get easier, but I really hope it's going to get better. And how did that then push you forward?
I mean, just living life is an act of faith. It's an act of hope every day. I mean, we probably each as an individual, if we don't say it, we think it, this level of hope that, um, I hope this car that's coming from the opposite direction,
Doesn't.
stops. I hope that my kids make it home safe. I hope. And I've always thought to myself, if a student or if an individual comes to me and says, "This is what's happening in my life. This is what's going on. I'm scared or I'm worried." There was always something I could offer. My
Mhm.
fear was when an individual would come to me and say the phrase, "I have no hope." Hope is the beginning of it all. And so I live my life with this constant hope of tomorrow being brighter, tomorrow being more successful. And so it drives me, and it has been this driving force in me to offer a glimpse of hope. I
Mhm.
know it's dark. I know it's broken, but hope says that we can put this back together. Hope says we can come back from this. Hope says that we can turn a corner. Hope says it's right around the next corner. It's right over the top of this next hill. And so that drives me,
Yeah.
the opportunity to offer. I can't give hope, but I can offer to walk alongside. I can offer to hope with you and for you. And so that has been a driving force from my days as a youth pastor to traveling, doing school assemblies, and now working with those that we work with the lifeguard.
One thing that comes up for me is that when you shared your story about being a foster family, and we were a foster family for almost 13 years, and we had 22 children in our care during that time, and most of them were NICU babies. So there's a lot of
Mm.
similarities there. And
Mhm.
I had two older boys. Then at the time when we started, they were 7 and 11, but they both graduated for high school while we were still doing care. So they went through that time.
Yeah.
And no matter how much you try to shelter them, guide them through not knowing too
Yeah.
much, right? The fact of the matter is that they have these children in their lives. And when we're talking about NICU babies, we're talking about, unfortunately, a lot of withdrawals. And
Yeah.
so they ask questions. And I'm a mom that's going to answer questions to the best of my ability within reason. And so when you talk about hope, I know hope is what kept me going. Hope for something different, hope for change, hope to save a child, right? Something, just hope,
Mhm.
a belief in something bigger. And for my husband too. But sometimes I ask myself, did I damage their hope?
Mm.
Did I create something? Did we create something? Because we really did ask the kids, is it still time for us to be doing this?
Mm.
Is this still what we're doing or is this too much? But when I look back in retrospect, I actually ask myself, did I create a sense of hopelessness in their belief that people can do better, in their belief that there is better? I don't believe I've led that life, but I do ask that myself. So it's really interesting that you brought that up because I've never said that out loud. I've
Huh.
never said that out loud. What is your thought on that? What is your perspective on that as a child in care that, that was part of the family caring for these children that have, even babies that have gotten exposed to so much trauma?
That's such a great question. And as a fellow parent, right? I mean, we think our parenting days are done when they're, or at least we perceive in those days that once they get out of the house, the parenting is over, but it's not because it's then
No.
the look back of, did I do that right? From my perspective, the babies that came into our house it was very similar. It was hard for me as a kid. And I can still remember thinking, when this little baby would come into our house, how could somebody reject
Mm,
that? Or
yeah.
how it was so inconceivable for me that how is that? And so I guess I saw it and I still do see it from the side of yeah, I guess, for that child and what I see happening says this is a hopeless situation. This child has no parents, nobody loves it. But I guess, and I think your kids would be very much the same, was I look at that now and what it taught me was in that situation, there was hope because we were the
Mm.
hope.
Mm,
And
yeah.
we brought hope alive that, just like, you had asked the question, was my definition of courage? It's certainly not, it's it's being willing to walk forward in the midst of fear, in the midst of being afraid. It's not the absence of that. And hope is not the absence of fear and dread and harm. It's looking and seeing the beauty that is through that and beyond that. And what can I do to bring that hope? So I
Yeah.
look at it, I would never, I wear it as such a badge for me. Maybe anytime I get a chance to I've been asked to speak to a couple foster parent groups and support groups and things like that. And it is such a pride thing for me. I try to keep it a holy pride, but it is such a pride thing for me to talk about my parents in that way of
Um,
being foster parents. It watched and I saw the pain and the hurt. I heard my mom, when I would come home after school, my mom was a stay-at-home mom. And
mhm.
so there was always, and we're German, so there was always some sort of pastry for us after school, a treat. My mom was always there. It was just, but there were those days where I would come home and the house would be dark and I would hear my mom in the front room and I could hear her praying. I could hear her crying. And I knew that the call had come, that it was time for that baby to go to her or his adoptive family. And I know that for my mom, there was that level of fear, maybe like, where's this child going to go? What's going to happen to them? Are they going to be raised in a great environment? But in that, there was again the hope
Mm,
and hope a lot of times is so out of our control.
yeah.
Sometimes it's, we look to heaven and just say, I hope, I hope.
Mhm. I hope. That
So
was
I would say,
powerful.
great job, mom. Great job, dad, to give your kids and expose your kids and give them the opportunity to see what offering and being the hands of hope is like.
It's like, thank you for that. That brought back some deep emotions when you were talking about your mom, because it is definitely the hardest and most beautiful gift I've ever been given. Right next to parenting, because darn,
Yeah.
it's hard, but it's just so beautiful because you are parenting these children forever, how long time they are there, right? For
Yeah.
however long they are there. So you've really lived this life of service in some way, whether you were doing it directly or within your family.
Yeah.
And then you went on to service with youth ministry and really spreading this message of it does get better. We hope it gets better. And in 2018, you and your wife took on the next service project. Walk us through a little bit about the nonprofit, why, how, the crazy,
Yeah.
and the God's call.
Yeah. It, it was quite the journey, with doing the school assemblies. I had mentioned that, I was invited to come over to India and do school assemblies, and never in my wildest dreams would I have ever thought. And then, when that would happen, when I'd be invited to go to these different countries, I'd think, what do I have to offer these people?
Mm,
I'm a Eastern Montana kid that grew up in such a safe environment. And so when I got there, and that was around 2008, 2008, 2009. It's where I was exposed to this tragedy of human trafficking. And
mm,
when I left there, I wanted to forget as soon as possible what I saw, what I smelt, what I felt. And I vowed to myself when I got home, I wasn't going to share it with my wife. I was just going to forget it. And it was so horrific. It was so, again, like, how could this be? And it was about a month and a half later, one of the individuals that I had met there had made a phone call to me and said, I'm coming back to the United States and we're going to set up an anti-trafficking group in the United States. And I feel like you're supposed to be a part of it. And I said, absolutely not. I've spent the last month trying to forget, and I'm going to continue to try and forget. I've got 3 daughters. I can't be in that headspace. I don't want to think about that. And over the next 3 years, about every month, this individual would call me and say, "Man, I just feel like this is the way it's supposed to be." And I'm like, "I appreciate that, but I don't feel like that's the way it's supposed to be." I mean, talk about running away.
Yeah.
And then it became obvious that this is what God had. So about 15 years ago, we jumped and began to work in this field of human trafficking. And it's when we began to see, doing school assemblies, we would hear kids talk about, at the end of an assembly, they'd come up, they'd bring their pack of cigarettes, or they'd bring a suicide note or a bag of drugs or something. And they would say, I'm going to make a change. I'm not going to live like that anymore. And not that those things weren't valid and powerful statements for kids moving forward, but we started to see this major shift. And now kids weren't coming up just with those things. They were coming up and wanting to share these horrific experiences that they were finding in their life of being sold by their parents or being molested. And this shift was shocking to me. And so we jumped into that. And in 2018, we realized that in all the work that we were doing in finding victims across the country at major events, Super Bowls, major conferences, things like that, wherever there was a population influx is where trafficking would flourish. But these victims and survivors that we were finding weren't coming from those major metropolitan areas. They were coming from small rural communities like my wife and I grew up in. And no one was really talking about or talking to those people. And so in 2018, we started the Lifeguard group, which one of our main goals was to go into these small rural communities across the country and to help bring an awareness, because the recoveries with the numbers and the statistics the way they are, for almost 4 million people being trafficked in the United States right now, 50 some million around the world. I mean, the recoveries it will take us a long time to catch up. But
Right. Right.
somebody's got to shut that front door, and somebody's
Yeah.
got to be at that prevention and that awareness side. And so that's when we started the Lifeguard group, and it has been a journey of hope, I guess, a
Oh,
journey of
yeah.
courage, a journey of, I
So
don't know.
first of all, I love everything about that. And first, there's so many reasons, but nothing changes unless something changes. And
Yeah.
we get so caught up in the noise of how we're supposed to do something, how we're supposed to make, like, you don't have the experience, you don't have the titles, you don't have this, you don't have that. But truly, I mean, the Bible talks about it. Even God calls the unknown. He doesn't
Yeah.
call the one standing up on stages already. He calls the unknown. And I think about that with you. You were the unknown. You were just
Oh,
living this quiet, really innocent life of spreading your hope, but you really didn't understand that that was just your first step of hope.
yeah.
That was just your first step.
Mm.
So on your website, it says every hour, 34 individuals enter a life of sexual exploitation. It is no longer an option to pretend human trafficking and sexual exploitation isn't everywhere. And we mean everywhere. Every town, every neighborhood, even yours. The problem is that people often don't know what human trafficking is in modern terms. When people hear about human trafficking, most people imagine dungeons and chains. They rarely think of phones and blackmail. They often think of stolen children and dark, sinister rooms. They rarely think of free children in their homes. And I'm not going to lie, Lowell, that literally knocked me out of my knees because I know that's the truth,
Yeah.
but the words were is take your breath away, because
Mhm.
that is the reality. We recently had Alani Bankhead on here, who is a rescue. She does a lot of rescue missions, and she talked about the commonality of where they're finding their victims and
Mhm.
how, as parents, we have to start asking harder questions. So I would love for you to really dive into that, because knowledge is everything. Knowledge is power. And like you
Mhm.
said, you've closed the front door, or you're working on closing the front door, but we as parents in every home can help you close that front door.
Absolutely. That people often ask, why is human trafficking growing so quickly? Why is it Why are we hearing about it so much? Well, I mean, right now, human trafficking is the second leading criminal enterprise in the world today, just behind drug trafficking. And it's not going to be long, and human trafficking will be the number one sought after commodity, human beings, for whether it's sex, labor, organs, domestic servitude, whatever it might be. Why is it so difficult? Well, it's so difficult because it's hiding in plain sight. And it hides in plain sight because in our Western culture, we have lost what really made us a culture, what made us special, and that is community. We have lost
Mm.
community. We bought into this false mantra of mind your own business, keep your nose out of other people's business. And that has put us in a very tough place. It's why we are where we are, because something horrific happens down the street and we say to ourselves, well, that's, I'm just going to mind my own business, just, or this is happening in my community, or this is going on. Well, that's not my business. Well, it is your business. Human trafficking, people, why don't we make more laws? Why aren't the cops doing more? Why isn't this, presidential administration we will never out legislate human trafficking. We can't legislate morality. It's
Nope.
not going to happen. Just like we're not going to take away the amount of foster kids that are looking to be put in a home or adopted. This is a human being issue, and human beings are the only ones that can solve it.
Yeah.
And so what makes this so horrific is that it's happening in your neighborhood. We just did a school assembly in North Dakota, a community of almost 1,000 people. In this community, they brought some smaller schools, bussed them in for the school assembly, and there were about 500 kids there. And it was a long drive, a long journey to be in front of 500 kids, but it was worth it. On our way home, we heard from the school superintendent. Coverage was spotty on our cellular service. We just got this text message that said, your visit was timely. You saved lives. And I was like, well, wow, that's a cool statement, but that's pretty bold, Well, we got into some better service, and Carson, who runs our school assembly program, called the superintendent, and she said, this is what's happened. There's not a ton of details yet. This was just the next day. She said, a couple of students from one of the smaller schools heard what you guys said and started putting some pieces together. And they went to their school administrator and said, hey, this is what we heard and this is what we've seen, and we think this is something to look into. And in that specific community of about 150 people, they uncovered a trafficking ring, all because two boys said, hey, they said we could make a difference. And they did.
They did.
And there were 3 or 4, as far as we know right now, there were 3 or 4 young ladies whose lives completely changed that day because 2 boys said, not in my town. This
Not
is
my
what we've seen. And, when we talk to parents and to students, my battle cry is nobody gets a free pass.
Right.
Nobody gets a free pass. When I say that to students, nobody gets a free pass in your life. They need to earn that place in your life. Everybody has to be looked at. Everybody has to be scrutinized. And I'm not telling you to just walk away because you don't like or you don't feel like or what have you, but nobody gets a free pass. And once they earn that place into your life, then you can have that level of trust. With parents, nobody gets a free pass, whether they have the title reverend, whether they have the title teacher, whether they have the title coach, whether they have the title of daycare director. Nobody gets a free pass to your kids. There is a cost of earning the right to speak into the life of my kid. I get that sounds almost over vigilant, but when it comes to the life of your kid and your kids, there is no other option. I mean, is there overvigilance? I don't think so.
Right.
Can we overprotect? I don't think so. And so nobody gets a free pass. But at the same time, it's time for us to start knocking on our neighbor's door, getting to know neighbors, getting to know our community, and getting in people's business. Because when we see something awry, we can make a difference. And it's on us to make that difference.
It's our responsibility as humans,
Absolutely.
but it's no one gets a free pass, and I love that. Don't get me wrong, because I am that mama. I hold accountability for everyone in life, including my children. Like, you will be
Yeah.
accountable for everything you do, and everyone around you sees. So remember that, right? But what I go back to is also like the video games don't get a free pass. The
Right.
phones don't get a free pass. The kids that they're hanging out with don't get a free pass, right? We have to go back to, and there's a big difference, a huge difference between being a helicopter parent, which is the term in today's world,
Right.
and being an involved parent. It's like night and day. I do not want my children to ask me how to do things. I don't.
Yeah.
I want them to know through my guidance and know to trust themselves and their intuition. I want them to know that they get to choose every day how they show up in this world. And
Right.
we have, for many reasons, you talked about being a stay at home, your mom being a stay at home parent. I was a stay at home parent for 20 years. I was gifted that blessing. And I'm still a stay at home parent because I work remotely, and I get to choose that schedule. But there's so many people. I was one of 5 with a single mom, and she worked 2 to 3 jobs sometimes. And we have allowed electronics to become babysitters.
Hmm.
And with no boundaries, no accountability, with no
Right.
knowledge. And we've got to get better at that. We've got to get better at, like you said, doing the hard work because they can get to our kids that way. They actually are getting to our kids that
Hmm.
way. And that's really scary. It's really scary because there's so much out there. But one of the things
Absolutely.
you said is there was only, we only touched 500 kids. But one of the comments I always say is would you do it for one? And in that
Hmm.
instance, that is the beauty of that comment is, would you do it for one? You did it for 500 kids. And because of that, because of one kid's brave, 2 kids' brave
Hmm.
opportunities to say, you know what, something's not right. It was for 3.
Yeah.
And that is it just overwhelming. That whole time you were talking about that, my arms were in full goosebumps because that's why you're doing what you're doing, Lowell. That's why is that 3 kids at a time is making a difference.
Yeah, for sure.
And when you talked about we're not gonna be able to ever out legislate this, I love that because we're right, we're not. We're not gonna be able to ever out legislate anything that requires human connection
Yeah.
and community and how
Yeah.
we've gotten away from that. And when we ask you to be involved, it's not about being the nosy Nancy. It's about being the concerned neighbor. The something doesn't feel right in my heart, and don't ignore that. One of the most powerful statistics I ever heard was in the first year of doing foster care. It wasn't during our training, but we went to a training at the middle school. I don't even remember what it was for. I can't tell you, but there was an auditorium full of people and we were listening to this person speak. And the statistic that was given to us is, and this was just one gender, so there's more than this, but this was what was given to us is that 1 in 10 men that you know has, or will molest a child. And it blew my mind because I'm like, okay, I know like 50 men. So does that mean I know 50 people? And the answer is yes. Yes,
Hmm.
I do. I know 5 people, or 5 people that have done the unimaginable in our minds.
Hmm.
And the statistic has probably changed at this point, honestly. That was a
Yeah.
long time ago. But we have to start getting, when you talk about, no one getting free reign, that's why. You
Yeah.
don't know who that 1 in 10 person is for you. So don't give them free reign.
Right. It's
So
when we talk to parents and you brought up, the phones and the video games, when a kid in Montana, if they want to be a hunter as
Mhm.
before they turn 18, they've got to go through hunter safety.
Yeah.
And I think now it's like 4 or 5 weeks online
Yep.
class, but they can't hunt until they complete that and pass the test. But we hand out this weapon to
Yes.
kids with no training, with no
Nope.
supervision, with no oversight, and we weaponize them. And I'm not about, and I tell this to kids all the time, I'm like, listen, I know for the next 5 minutes, I'm not going to be your favorite person in the room. But the fact is that I'm not against giving not only my kids when they were young, but all kids the access to everything that is great about the internet and online. I'm not against that. But there has to be a realization of the reality that when we give our kids access to all of this, we give all of this access to our kids.
Yes.
And the amount of times that I have had parents, raise their hand and say, well, what about my kids' privacy? What about their autonomy. And I'm like, what is that? There were times when my kids were young
Right.
and they would sit in different presentations and they would hear people ask that question. Well, what about, my kids' privacy and their rights? And I would look down at them and they would snicker like, what is that? And I get, right? There's a level of privacy, right? But when it comes to this, when it comes to computers, the amount of parents that allow their kids to have a digital device, whether a computer, a phone, or a tablet, behind closed doors, unsupervised, it's horrifying. And I tell
Right.
parents all the time, if I could go in your school and if I could get unfettered access, which I know would be impossible, to every student's digital footprint in this school, look at their social media, look at their outlets and their inlets, I would be able to show you, and I confidently say that over 25%, if not closer to 50% of those students are actively being groomed and have no idea that it's taking place. And if those kids have no idea, I'm telling you that the parents have no idea. The amount of parents that will
Yes.
tell me, oh, my kids have time for that Facebook or that Instagram, but I don't have time for that. Well, here's the deal. If your kids have time for Facebook, then you have time for Facebook. If they have time for gaming, then you better have time for gaming. We have lost way too many kids because of playing Roblox or whatever the other game might be, because they've been on WhatsApp, because they've been on Discord, been on Facebook and Instagram messaging without parents supervising. We've lost too many kids for us
Yes.
to raise this banner of my child's privacy. And I'm not saying that our kids don't deserve to have privacy, but it's not a fine line. There is a bold line that needs to be drawn as parents and saying, I have an obligation to be your parent and to be your protector and teach you what is safe and what is not safe.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And what I want to share right now is a very vulnerable place, because I think two things when you're talking about this is that yes, they deserve their privacy, but it's also an earned privacy. There has to be
Absolutely.
proof that they can handle that privacy. It's not just
Mhm.
gifted. It's like the driver's license. Are you going to give a driver's license to a kid that
Right.
has shown you that they're reckless? I hope the hell not, right? I hope
Right.
not.
Yeah.
But I feel like I'm a pretty vigilant parent, and I'm very involved in all the things, and I despise games. Okay. I've despised them since I was a kid. I've just never been my mindset. And our 10 now 11-year-old son recently got his first gaming system. And I was like, looking through the games that that he was able to purchase. Okay, yeah, that one's going to be fine. And, all the things. And guess what? I knew nothing about Roblox. And guess what was on the back end of one of those games? And thankfully, one of my older sons was like, Mom, there's that game. He can't play that. And I'm like, what
Mhm.
do you mean? We talked about this game. You said this is a safe game. Because I always ask him for information. He goes, it's not that game. It's what he can access within that game. And it blew my guilt, shame. I mean, there's so much. I mean, do I think that he accessed anything? Thank the Lord, no. No, I don't. I
Mhm.
really don't. We talked about some things and they don't have online access, but it doesn't matter. It's that it was in my home and I didn't know it was in my home. It was in my home even though I vetted the game that he
Yeah.
purchased, right?
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
knowledge, reminding ourselves that we don't know everything. We know next to nothing in the
Right.
reality of it. And that we constantly have to be asking these questions or asking people we trust to help us get the answers. So
Absolutely.
it was so great that you brought that up, because I just believe it was an aha moment for me. And we have to be more conscious of the fact that what is not what will always be. Things are these peoples these individuals that are hunting our children are really smart.
Oh,
They're really smart.
that's the thing. We look at whether it's on TV, a movie, or even if we watch and see on the news, if
Right.
there is really any true news these days. But, somebody that is predatory, that wants to rob a bank or wants to steal the money, I mean, they're sly about it. There's a plan that they go about, and the plan is they're going to execute it undercover and away from being under watchful eye. And to think that these predators and that's what I call them, they're
Yeah.
predators. Um, they they will get what it is that they want, and they will find a way to get there. And they learn from each other, they communicate with each other. There are communities online on the dark web where they share their wares, and they are, like you said, they're, I hate to give them kudos of any kind, but
Yeah,
they are smart.
they're smart.
They have a way about it. There's and our kids are getting caught in it. Our there are adults that are getting caught in it. The number of adults that we've had that will come to us and be like, oh, I did this, or I trusted this person. I thought they were a trustworthy person. And again, nobody gets a free pass. And the level of scrutiny that needs to take place, there's a book that I recommend. I'm not a great reader myself. I'm not a very academic person, but I tell people all the time, if you don't read this book, you're stealing from yourself. And the name of the book is The Gift of Fear, written by a man named Gavin de Becker. And Gavin de Becker he's built a corporation around one very simple thought. And that is that we have this thing called whether you want to call it an intuition, a gut feeling, sense that we get. And
Yeah.
every parent and every individual knows, because we've gotten that feeling that says, man, something's off here. And in his book, Gavin de Becker talks about that we have been given this gift of an internal guardian that warns us of risky and dangerous situations. But the fact is that so many of us walk away
Ignore it.
from that feeling.
Yeah.
We don't trust that. And that, in my mind, it's a divine gift.
Yeah.
It's an inherent gift that each and every human being has. And we've all experienced it, whether it's walking into a room or meeting an individual, we've thought to ourselves, something is off.
Yeah.
So then the next step of discerning what that is, and then looking around to what it is that will give context to that feeling. And in what we do in our life right now, that book is really our playbook. And we tell, like,
Yeah.
parents are like, oh, we need more training. We need more training. And training is great. We do a training. We do a training called Guardians of the Digital Galaxy for parents to understand how they can monitor that and be better parents in that realm. But with that, each one of us has a basic level of training, and believe it, if that neighbor or that individual says, hey, well, Johnny, to come over and have a sleepover, and that gut feeling says something's off, you do not owe it in. Again, nobody gets a free pass to be like, well, I don't want to have these feelings. I don't want to be judgmental. Nobody
Nope.
gets a free pass.
No repass. I love that. And it's so valid that our intuition is one of our biggest superpowers. And
Absolutely.
we so frequently shut it down. We make excuses for why we're feeling the way we're feeling versus just owning it and honoring it. So you guys created the Lifeguard group, and what you do is not only educate, but you also have places where individuals that have been rescued get to come to heal. So I need to hear a little bit about the nonprofit and how listeners can help you, how listeners can, maybe they're there for financial help, maybe they're there for volunteer help, doesn't matter. Like, how can they help you and assist you and get to know you better?
So the Lifeguard group, we really have 4 components, and that's to respond, rescue, to restore, and revive victims and survivors of human trafficking. The respond part is kind of the umbrella of everything. Like, I get it. We may not always do it right, but we will always show up. And anytime we hire another staff member, I say, listen, I don't need to hire the expert. We can move you to that. We can find you the training to make you an expert. I just need an individual that will show up, that will respond with compassion, respond with empathy, respond with understanding, whatever it might be. The rescue side is, we have recovery teams. We have a search coordinator that when a kid goes missing in our world, a missing kid is a vulnerable kid, a runaway kid is a vulnerable kid. I mean, kids are vulnerable simply because they're kids, but then you put them on the street, you put them in an unfamiliar situation. And we always say, when there's a runaway, they're either running from something horrific or they're running to something horrific. And so we recognize that situation needs to change quickly. And we have a recovery team that when we get a call that an individual is being trafficked and needs to be taken out of a situation, I always call them, it's the team that we have that doesn't exist, if you know what I mean. And people are they get excited about that. That's what the movies are made of. But that,
Yeah.
to be honest with you, Corey, that's the easy part.
Yeah.
The tough part comes in that place of restoration and healing and changing a life situation. That's where hope begins, right? To
Yeah.
take us right back to the beginning of our conversation. That's where hope begins because when they show up at Crooked Tree Ranch or the Lifehouse that's there for, and that's a shelter for adult women who have been trafficked, they honestly feel like there is no hope.
Yeah.
It's like, being struck with this terminal illness and wondering if maybe it's just better to let me die than to
Mm.
keep me alive in the midst of the pain.
Yeah.
But again, showing them that picture of hope. And so our I guess unstated mission at the Lifehouse is to create a culture of restoration and hope.
Mm.
And I tell our staff out there all the time, your job is to create a culture of hope and restoration that they can live in and feel like there is a better day tomorrow.
There's a better day. Yeah.
We have so many great volunteers. We have those that come out and help with, we do equine therapy. So
Mm.
obviously we need help with and always take help with our horses and things like that. We have art therapy, we have dance therapy, exercise therapy, and then
Mm.
all of the traditional counseling that is there, which, sometimes I wonder if we over therapyize. I don't know what the official word is, because every day there's another piece of therapy. And that's why we wanted to have the different dynamic, maybe
Yeah.
non-traditional therapies like equine. And there's something powerful about just walking out into the round pen with a wild Mustang and watching that Mustang come and lay his head on your shoulder.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to say a word, just
Nope.
listen. And I tell those survivors and residents all the time, those are your greatest counselors because you can tell them whatever you want. You can be as angry as you need to be, and they will never tell a soul, and they will always pay attention. And they do.
They do.
And so that has been quite the process of, when they come, they're hurting. The goal is that when they leave, that they have built community, that they've built relationships around themselves, that they have a new career focus looking forward. One of our residents, she got her CNA degree, passed her
Mm.
boards, and is now working as a CNA. And every day when I see her, I'm just like, oh my gosh, you are the one giving care. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
And
Giving
someday
hope.
she'll look at me and she goes, not today, Lowell. It was not a good day. And I'm like, okay, but still, it's pretty amazing.
Not today, Lowell. I love that.
Not today, not today.
I have to say that, maybe we do over therapize, but one of the beautiful gifts I think of what you are you're providing an opportunity for is for people to these humans to connect in a way that works for them.
Yep,
Because we don't all heal the same way. We don't all process the same way. And talking to somebody isn't necessarily what's going to work for one, but maybe for the next, it's exactly what they need. Two of my kiddos ride horses, and they will tell you to the depths of their soul that not only their best friend and their first love, so their best friend and their first love was their horse, but two,
yep,
that there's no therapy like the view between the ears of a horse, right?
absolutely.
And that one's a boy, one's a girl, two different age groups, all the things, but they both got so much out of it. And our 17-year-old, I'm going to share this really quick because a lot of people don't understand equine therapy. Our 17-year-old was our first adopted child, and she had
Mm,
very significant sensory processing disorder. And for people that don't, she just doesn't take information in and process it, and her body becomes very overwhelmed. And so early on, I was, like honestly grasping at straws. How can I help this baby?
mm,
How can I help? Because she was a baby. She was just a year of age when this all started kind of unraveling in front of us. And she would find things. It was amazing. The human body is so knowing. She would find things. But my oldest son was the one riding horses. And so there was a huge age gap. And so getting in the car and being buckled was one of the things that really threw her off. And we'd have to drive to the barn for him because we didn't have property at that point. And so his horse was somewhere else. And we had to drive to the barn for him to take his lessons each week. And she would lose her mind, just lose her mind, like stop breathing because she just could not handle. And we would get to the barn and one day she was in my hands. I mean, she's in this little pink suit. I can see her like she's a little pink suit. She's in my hands and she lays her head on our horse at the time was Lady, lays her head on Lady. And it's just like she melted. It was just like
Mhm.
everything. And it was what's happening right now, right? Long story short, it got to the point where she would actually like put her fingers up Lady's nose. She needed to feel her breathe, right? She would hold her ears. And thank goodness we had the most kind, gentle horse in the world. And she went on to start riding when she was 2 years of age
Yeah.
because of the connection she had and the calming that a horse could give her.
Mhm.
And that's what I mean. Like we're all different,
Yeah, absolutely. I've watched ladies, we call it the ranch. I've watched them corner a horse in the arena and scream and cry and pound their
right?
fist. And I watched that horse just stand there and look, not judge, nothing. And then they go to walk away and I watch that horse bobbing its
Nudging.
head, following up,
Yeah.
and pretty soon stands right behind.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
to myself, "Man, if you woulda yelled at me like that, I'd have been gone a long time ago." But that
Right?
horse connected, and I mean, I've done some reading, and those that are really my wife is a horse person, and she's like, "Listen, the hearts begin to in
The same.
sequence and blah, blah, blah." And I'm like, "Okay, okay, okay."
Yep.
But she's like, "Until you connect with an animal of that size and recognize that it's willing to submit and to connect with you, you don't grasp the power in that therapy that takes
Yeah.
place." And like you said, no one has to say a word. No one has
Nope.
to say a word. It's
Nope.
just,
It's just
it's
power,
feeling their breath.
magic.
It's feeling their nose and
Uh,
letting them eat out of your hand.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh.
it's awesome.
It's awesome. It is. It is awesome. Well, I am going to drop everything about the foundation in the show notes. And as I ask all guests, and you've already given some of this information, is that what is your definition of courage? And you wrote, courage is the deliberate choice to take a necessary action, even when you're afraid. So in spite of fear. And it is your story, right? It is your story.
Yeah,
It is these children and these women's stories when they are rescued and they choose hope over what has always been. It's these boys as in that audience that said something or believed something because of a choice. They knew something. They acted in courage, even though maybe there was a lot in them saying, no, just shut up, right? Just
right,
shut up.
right.
It's the one that goes to the neighbor and says, are you okay? Are you
Yeah,
okay? And so I just encourage you all, if there's something in your life that feels not right, listen to yourself because your heart knows and ask
mhm,
a question. Take a courageous leap because even if it's just for one, it's worth it.
absolutely.
So, Lowell, I can't thank you enough for being on the show today, for sharing your story, for sharing your passion. I can't thank you enough for being a courageous leader. You really enlighten this world and you give us hope. And I thank you for that.
Well, I appreciate it, and I thank you for what you've done as a foster mom and a mom. It's now one of my goals, and I to make it one of your goals is one day I hope that you will be able to interview one of our survivors that
Oh,
comes to
yes.
our program on your podcast. I think that would be so great.
That would be amazing.
Talk about courage, right?
Yeah, talk about courage, right? The vulnerability and the
Yeah.
courage. I am currently on uh, I've interviewed 2 foster children who have aged out, and
Mm.
so they've been on, and I'm hoping to see them in person actually next week and do more of an in-person interview because their stories, these women's stories, these children's stories, that's where the magic is. See their hope and to see their courage. That's where we as humans need to connect more.
And that's where we get to offer hope is
Yeah.
when we listen as they regain their voice and see the power in their voice.
Yes, absolutely. Well, again, listeners, thank you for being on. Thank you for listening. Thank you for all the things. I hope that this gave you just a little bit of courage to provide hope in your world. And until next time, we'll talk again.